Hello, third graders. Welcome back to our lesson. Today we're going to be talking about a new group of vertebrate animals. But before we do, let's go ahead and review what we have learned this week all about fish. So I'm going to read off a statement, and I want you to tell me if the statement is true or false. So think about everything we've learned this week about fish. Fish are warm-blooded. True or false? That is false. Fish are not warm-blooded. They are cold-blooded, meaning that their body temperature changes to that of their environment. Fish have backbones. That is true. Fish are under the group of vertebrates, which means that they have those group of bones called vertebrae down their back. The habitats fish live in are aquatic. That is true. Remember, aquatic means having to do with water, and fish live in freshwater like lakes, rivers, streams, and ponds, and also salt water. Fish breathe oxygen in water using gills. That is true. They do not have lungs like you and I do. Instead, water passes over the gills, which pull out oxygen. Fish have feathers. That is false. Fish do not have feathers covering their body. Fish have scales. And that is true. Fish do have scales covering their body. All right, today we're going to learn about a new group of vertebrate animals, amphibians. So go ahead and grab your classifying animals reading packet. You're going to open up to the third page or page 61, and you're going to see at the top amphibians. Let's learn about what makes amphibians a special group of vertebrate animals. Amphibians are cold-blooded vertebrates that are born in water, but usually grow up on land or live near it. The word amphibian comes from Latin meaning both sides of life. So this is important because amphibians mean both. They live in water and on land. Unlike fish who only live in water and are aquatic, amphibians are both. So they are born in eggs in water, and then as they get older, they move to land. They are also cold-blooded, just like fish, meaning their body temperature changes to their environment. Here are some examples of amphibians that you might recognize. Frogs and toads. Amphibians lay their eggs in water or wet places. Like fish eggs, amphibian eggs are jelly and do not have shells. When the eggs hatch, the baby amphibian uses gills to breathe underwater. So they lay their eggs in water, just like a fish, they're jelly-like. When they hatch, then the baby comes out and they breathe using gills. As it grows, its body changes. It grows legs and skin and will begin to grow over its gills. So skin starts to grow over its gills as its body changes and it gets bigger. After a few months, the gills have become lungs. So their gills transform over time. That means when they get lungs, the amphibian now breathes oxygen from the air instead of the water. So they can't live in water like a fish anymore because they have to take a breath like you and I. Then the amphibian makes its way out of the water and onto land. Look at this picture here. Can you think of what this is? I think it's a frog. You can see that this baby still has its tail from being born, and it hasn't quite developed full lungs to live out of it. Here is a picture of some eggs, amphibian eggs. Now, amphibians have to lay their eggs in water because they dry out in the air. So if you were to take these eggs out into the air, they will dry out. Many of the eggs will hatch into larvae, just like fish eggs do. That's the beginning stage. But most of the eggs will never hatch. Any idea why they won't hatch? Well, there's many ways that these eggs can be destroyed. One, they can become a meal. Other animals eat the eggs. They can also be washed away if all of a sudden there's a huge flood or tons of rain. Or if it even stops raining in certain areas, they might be exposed to the air and dry up. A small percentage of eggs that do not hatch will move on to the next stage of development, but very slim. This picture here is the larva stage of most frogs, toads, and salamanders. This is what we call a tadpole. A tadpole has gills, just like a fish, and they breathe underwater. They are herbivores, which means they eat tiny little plants, but they're so little they have to be cautious because a bigger fish or animal can just swallow them without realizing. Here are the stages of a frog. So it starts off here as a tadpole, and then it undergoes a change by morphing, is another word, into a different creature. This whole process of changing from a tadpole to a frog is called metamorphosis. Say that word with me. Metamorphosis. As tadpoles, that's the beginning, grow, skin will begin to cover their gills. So as this tadpole gets bigger, skin starts to cover its gills and they grow those lungs. As you can see, then this animal has to be able to breathe oxygen on land. You also see tiny legs start to grow and appear. As this tadpole gets bigger and bigger, it starts to look more and more like its land creature until its tail completely disappears. Those amphibians that survive to adulthood will be hopping and crawling around on land and searching for food. Once the animal has made it to land, it's no longer an herbivore, meaning eating plants. Instead, they eat bugs, worms, spiders, and slugs with their sticky tongues. Most adult amphibians are now carnivores, meaning they eat meat. Adult amphibians have lungs to breathe air. They breathe through their skin too. Their skin is thin enough for air to pass through it. It is also wet and smooth. Amphibians often live near water to keep their skin wet. So amphibians have wet, smooth skin, and it's thin, and air actually passes through their skin, unlike yours and mine, and they use that air to breathe with also. Here's a picture of the amphibian's smooth, wet skin. Skin is one of the most important organs on the amphibian. Again, it has to stay moist in order for them to breathe. So they usually are near water so that they can keep their skin moist. They might hop into the water or crawl beneath a moist log. Through this moist skin, they breathe in addition to their lungs. Frogs and toads are the most common kinds of amphibians. Salamanders and newts are amphibians too. Another group of amphibians called Sicilians, do not have legs, so they look more like large snakes. We don't know much about this group of animals because they live mostly underground. And over here is a picture of a salamander. This is actually of a newt. Salamanders are often confused with lizards, but lizards are not Amphibians. So that's another group. This is a salamander, and a lot of people think it is a lizard, but a salamander has that smooth, moist skin. A lizard does not. Salamanders live near water or under moist logs. Lizards do not have to. Here's a picture of that Sicilian. Here's a picture. It kind of does look like a snake, but think about this. They're also called slow worms or blind worms. They look like earthworms, kind of, but they're not. They are amphibians without legs. They need very, very wet weather, so they usually live in tropical or warm climates. A Sicilian usually can range from about 5 inches to 5 feet long. They have very, very sharp teeth and large jaws, and they mainly live underground, and they only come up from their ground to eat. So that is a specific type of an amphibian called a Sicilian. You're going to watch this video in a little bit to learn more about amphibians. So let's talk about what we just learned, amphibians, and think about our previous group called fish. How are amphibians alike and how are they different? Well, they both begin living underwater. They both start by breathing using gills. They both lay eggs. They're cold-blooded, and they're vertebrates. Well, what is different? Well, an amphibian grows up to live on land, and a fish does not. Amphibians grow lungs as they get bigger to breathe, and fish continue to grow or breathe through gills. So today we've learned that a tadpole is a type of a baby amphibian, that it starts by breathing through gills like a fish and lives underwater. And then as it gets bigger, it turns into an adult frog, which breathes using lungs and through their skin. We also talked about amphibians are cold-blooded, meaning their body temperature changes. They lay eggs. They have smooth, moist skin. They are vertebrates, meaning they have a backbone, and that they live in water and out of water. I hope you've learned something new about amphibians today.